I didn't even make it halfway down my porch steps before I knew something was wrong. You ever get that feeling where your brain notices it before you can explain it? Yeah, like that. Coffee still hot in my hand, Saturday morning quiet, birds doing their thing, nothing unusual, except there was a sound that didn't belong. Metal clanking, wood snapping in a place, low voices like people working too early for a weekend, and then I saw it. Right there, in the back corner of my yard, a frame. Not just any frame, a structure. Fresh lumber, clean cuts, staked into the ground like it had every right to be there. And the worst part? The concrete was still wet. Like, still shining under the sun. Which meant this wasn't a plan, this was already happening. And I just froze. Because that corner, that exact corner, wasn't just dirt. That's where my mom planted her rose bush. 6 years ago, the summer before she passed. I still remember her kneeling there, telling me roses needed patience. They don't bloom for people in a rush, she said, and I watered that thing every week after she was gone, even when I didn't feel like doing anything else. That bush made it through storms, heat waves, one bad winter, and now it was gone. Buried, under someone else's concrete, and standing right in the middle of it, like he owned the whole horizon, was my neighbor. Let's call him Trevor Hayes. Late 40s, always acting like the neighborhood HOA president even though he wasn't. The kind of guy who trims his lawn edges with a ruler and corrects your garbage bin placement like it's a federal offense. He saw me. Of course he did. And he smiled. Not a friendly smile, not even a nervous one. No, this was that tight little smirk people wear when they already decided you're not going to do anything about whatever they just did. Morning, he said, like we were just two guys chatting over a fence. It's barely over the line. You don't even use this corner. I hadn't said a word yet. That's what got me. He already had the argument ready. And I just stood there, staring at the concrete, staring at where the rose bush used to be, trying to line up what I was seeing with what I knew was real, because the survey marker, the actual property stake, was still there. I could see the top of it, barely sticking out from under the edge of his fresh slab. So I pointed at it. Didn't raise my voice, didn't step closer, just pointed. Everything past that marker, I said, real calm, is mine. He didn't even look, didn't glance, didn't check, didn't hesitate. It's already framed out, he said, turning back to his workers. Don't overreact. Don't overreact. You ever notice how people say that right after they've done something they know is completely out of line? Like they're not talking to you. They're talking over you, trying to control the narrative before you even process what happened. And I could feel my hands shaking. Not anger. Well, yeah, anger, but the kind that comes from disbelief. Like, this is actually happening, and I have to decide right now what kind of person I'm going to be about it. So I didn't argue, didn't yell, didn't escalate. I just nodded once, turned around, walked back inside, set my coffee down, and wrote the exact time on a piece of paper. 9:12 a.m. Because something in me said, this isn't going to be settled with a conversation. This is going to be settled properly. Now here's the thing. Trevor wasn't stupid. That's what made it worse. He knew exactly where the property line was. We had surveys done years ago when the previous owner sold me the place. Clean boundaries. Clear documentation. No ambiguity. So this wasn't confusion. This was a decision. And decisions like that don't come out of nowhere. They come from assumptions about you. About what you'll tolerate. About how far they can push before you push back. And apparently, Trevor had decided I was the kind of guy who'd just let it go. Maybe because I kept to myself. Maybe because I never complained about his leaf blower at 7 a.m. or the way he parked his truck half on my driveway line. Maybe because I didn't play the HOA politics game. Or maybe he saw that rose bush and thought sentiment equals weakness. Either way, he kept building. All week. Every day I'd look out the window, and the structure would be more finished. Walls went up. Roof panels got installed. Nails hammered in like punctuation marks on a sentence I didn't agree to. And I gave him a week. Didn't say anything. Didn't interfere. Just watched. Documented. Took photos. Logged dates. Times. Progress. Because if you're going to do something, you do it right. By day 7, the thing was complete. Painted a dull gray, like he was trying to make it blend in, which somehow made it worse, and stacked with firewood along the side like it had been there for years. Like it belonged. Like he'd already won. And I remember standing there that evening, looking at it, and thinking, you really believe I'm not going to do anything? That's when it shifted. Not from anger to revenge, but from emotion to clarity. Because now it wasn't about the rose bush anymore. It was about the line, and whether it meant anything at all. All right, pause the story for a second, because this is where most people mess up, and I almost did too. From a legal perspective, what Trevor did wasn't just rude. It crossed into something very specific, encroachment. And not the, oops, my fence is an inch off, kind. We're talking about a permanent structure built knowingly over a visible survey marker. That matters a lot. According to standard procedure, once a structure is established and left unchallenged, it can actually complicate ownership over time. Some places even have laws where, if you ignore it long enough, you risk losing rights to that portion of land. Sounds insane, but yeah, that's real. Now here's the psychological side, and this part is just as important. This is a psychological trap. Trevor wasn't just building a shed, he was testing a boundary. Not the physical one, the personal one. He moved fast, poured concrete early, framed it out quickly, because momentum creates pressure. The longer it stands, the harder it feels to challenge. Most people hesitate, not because they don't have a case, but because confrontation feels heavier once something looks finished. And that hesitation, that's exactly what people like him count on. So yeah, this was never just about wood and concrete. It was about control. So once I understood exactly what game was being played, I stopped reacting and started building my case. Not emotionally, not loudly, just methodically, step by step, like someone who knows the ending is already written. They just need to let it play out. First thing I did Monday morning, I called a licensed surveyor. Not a guy with a tape measure and a guess. I mean certified, documented, the kind of professional whose paperwork actually holds up when things get official. Took him about 2 days to come out. And when he did, he didn't even need long. He walked the boundary, checked the original markers, cross-referenced the plat map, and then he looked at me, kind of half-smiling like he'd seen this exact situation 100 times before. Yeah, he said, tapping his boot right near the edge of that concrete slab. This is over. Not a little either. How much? I asked. He glanced down again, measured twice just to be precise, and said, 22 inches. 22 inches. Not a rounding error. Not a misunderstanding. That's deliberate space. That's someone deciding your land is negotiable. And the report he gave me? Clean. Clear. Photographed. Stamped. Signed. The kind of document that doesn't argue, it states. So I took that, along with every photo I'd been quietly collecting all week, and I filed a formal complaint with the county. Not HOA, not neighborhood mediation, not a friendly letter. Straight to the people who actually enforce zoning and property law. Because at this point, this wasn't a disagreement. It was a violation. Now here's where it gets interesting. When you file something like that, it doesn't explode overnight. There's a process. Paperwork gets reviewed. Inspectors get assigned. Notices get drafted. And during that window, everything looks calm on the outside. Trevor kept going about his routine like nothing had changed. He'd walk past that shed, toss another log on the stack, maybe glance over at my place just long enough to check if I was watching. And I think he thought silence meant surrender. Which, honestly, is exactly what he was hoping for from the start. About 10 days later, the letter showed up. Official county notice. Stamped. Dated. Very clear language. Violation of setback requirements. Unauthorized construction. Confirmed encroachment of 22 inches onto adjacent property. No permit filed. And then the part that really matters. 15 days. 15 days to remove the structure entirely at his own expense. Or the county would do it for him. Now I didn't deliver that letter. They did. But I knew the exact moment he read it. Because that same evening, right around sunset, I heard a knock on my door. And I already knew. I opened it, and there he was. Trevor Hayes, but not the same Trevor. The smirk? Gone. Posture? Different. You could see it in his face, like someone had just explained gravity to him after he spent a week pretending it didn't exist. Hey, he started, rubbing the back of his neck, not making full eye contact. Can we talk for a second? I leaned against the doorframe. We are. He gave this awkward little laugh, like he was trying to reset the tone. Look, this whole thing, it got blown out of proportion. I mean, it's just a shed. Just a shed. Funny how it shrinks when consequences show up. You got the notice, I said. Yeah, I saw it. He replied quickly, waving a hand like it was paperwork clutter. But come on, we're neighbors. We don't need to drag the county into this. We can figure something out. Like adults. There it was. That line. Not I'm sorry. Not I messed up. Just, let's minimize it and make it your responsibility to be reasonable. And I just looked at him for a second, really looked this time. Because this is the part people don't talk about enough. When someone who pushed you suddenly wants peace, it's not because they respect you. It's because something else finally forced them to. The deadline's in the letter, I said. Flat. No emotion. And you could see it hit him. That moment where he realized this wasn't going to turn into a negotiation. His jaw tightened. Oh, so that's how you're going to be? He said, voice sharpening now. Vindictive over a couple feet of dirt. I didn't respond. Because at that point, there was nothing left to explain. He shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked off my porch like I'd just broken some unspoken agreement. But here's the truth. There was never an agreement. There was just assumption. Day 15 came and went. The shed didn't move. Not an inch. And I'll be honest, I almost wondered if he'd try something last minute. Maybe hire a crew overnight. Maybe partially dismantle it. Maybe try to stall. But no, he doubled down. Because some people would rather lose big than admit they were wrong early. Day 16, 9:03 a.m., a county flatbed truck rolled into the street. No sirens. No drama. Just quiet, official efficiency. 2 workers stepped out. Clipboard, tools. That same energy of people who've done this before and don't need to explain it twice. Trevor was already outside. Arms crossed. Standing on his back porch like he was watching a storm roll in that he couldn't stop. I stepped out too. Not close, just enough to see. And then it started. Bolts came off first. Clean, practiced movements. Panels removed one by one. The roof came down in sections. Wood stacked, sorted, loaded. No rushing, no hesitation, just systematic dismantling. And the whole time, Trevor didn't say a word. Didn't argue. Didn't protest. Because at this stage, it's not a conversation anymore. It's execution. Neighbors slowed down as they passed. Some pretended not to stare, others didn't even try. A couple people actually stopped on the sidewalk, watching like it was some kind of live demonstration of consequences. And honestly, in a way it was. By 11:47 a.m., it was gone. Completely gone. All that was left was the concrete base. Cracked in places from where they broke it apart. Rough edges exposed, sitting there like a scar that hadn't decided what it wanted to become yet. The flatbed pulled away. Workers gone. Street quiet again. And Trevor? Still standing there. Same spot. Same crossed arms. But now, there was nothing left to defend. A few days later, I got confirmation of the final bill. Removal. Transport. Storage. Zoning fine. Administrative fees. Just over $3,000. For a shed that never legally existed. And that rose bush? Gone. Completely dead. The roots didn't survive the concrete pour. That part. Yeah, that still stings. Because you can replace wood. You can repay money. But some things don't come back the same way. For weeks after, that patch of ground just sat there. Exposed. Uneven. Impossible to ignore. Every person walking by could see it. Not just a construction mistake. A decision. A very expensive, very public decision. And I didn't touch it right away. Didn't rush to fix it. Because something about it felt important to leave as is for a while. Like a reminder. Not for him. For me. That boundaries only mean something. When you're willing to enforce them. So yeah, that's how it ended. No big courtroom showdown. No dramatic apology. No moment where Trevor suddenly saw the error of his ways, and we shook hands over a rebuilt fence. Just a flatbed truck. A bill for a little over $3,000. And a patch of broken concrete sitting out in the open like a quiet reminder that actions don't always come with warnings. Sometimes they come with invoices. And I've had a lot of time to think about it since then, more than I expected, honestly. Because on the surface, it's easy to tell this story like it's about property lines, permits, HOA vibes, neighbor disputes. All the usual suburban drama. But that's not really what stuck with me. What stuck with me was that moment. That smirk. Because if I'm being real with you, that's where the whole thing actually started. Not the concrete, not the framing, not even the encroachment itself. It started the second he decided I wasn't going to push back. And that brings me to something important. The lesson here is, most conflicts like this don't begin with action, they begin with assumption. Someone makes a quiet calculation about who you are, how you behave, what you'll tolerate, And then they act based on that version of you, not the real one. And if you don't correct that early, it grows. Now let's talk about the part people struggle with, the being nice phase. Because I get it. Nobody wakes up thinking, today feels like a great day to file a formal complaint against my neighbor. That's not who most of us are. We're wired to avoid friction, to keep things smooth, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But here's the problem. That instinct. In situations like this, it can work against you. This is a psychological trap. Because the longer you stay quiet, the more the other person interprets that silence as agreement. Not hesitation, not patience, agreement. And once they lock into that belief, every step they take after feels justified to them. So when you finally speak up, it doesn't feel like you're correcting a problem. It feels, to them, like you're creating one. That's why Trevor called me vindictive. Not because I did something extreme, but because I didn't match the version of me he had already decided on. And that's uncomfortable for people. Now from a legal perspective, there's another layer here that matters just as much. Boundaries, real, documented, survey-backed boundaries, don't enforce themselves. The system only works if you actually use it. If I had ignored that shed, even for a few months, things could have gotten messy. Paper trails blur. Intent becomes harder to prove. And in some cases, you can even run into claims where someone argues they've been using that land long enough to gain rights to it. Sounds wild, I know, but it happens. Which is why timing matters. According to standard procedure, the earlier you document and report an issue like this, the cleaner your position stays. Facts are fresh. Evidence is clear. And most importantly, you're not reacting emotionally, you're responding correctly. And I think that's the balance people miss. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't about punishing him. It was about not losing something quietly just because it felt uncomfortable to speak up. There's a difference. Now, I did replant that rose bush. Spring came around. I cleared out what was left of that concrete, brought in fresh soil, and put a new one in the same spot. It's growing slowly, but steady. Not the same plant, but the same place. And in a weird way, that feels right. Because that spot means something now, not just because of my mom, but because of what it represents. A line that got tested and held. So let me ask you something honestly. At what point would you have stepped in? Would it have been the moment you saw the frame go up? The second he poured concrete? When he gave you that look, like your space didn't matter? Or would you have waited? Hoping it'd resolve itself. Hoping it wasn't worth the tension. Hoping maybe you could just let it go? No judgment either way, seriously. Everyone's wired differently. But if there's one thing I'd pass on from this whole experience, it's this. The moment you know something isn't right, that's usually the moment you're supposed to act. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just clearly. Because boundaries don't disappear all at once. They erode. Quietly. Inch by inch. 22 inches at a time. So yeah, tell me what you think. Would you have handled it the same way? Or would you have done something different?